Hello, yes, and welcome to Irish Football Fan TV on this Tuesday evening. Gerard Brown here with you. Of course, I'm also joined by Gary Spain and Jack Maguire for our League of Ireland preview show tonight. Yes, after nearly 5 months, about 4.5 months since the 7th of March when the ball was last kicked in anger in the League of Ireland, we are finally back with its return this Friday night. Games across the Premier Division on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 4 games in the First Division on Friday night and one on Sunday. As I mentioned, Gary and Jack here with me as well tonight. How are you all keeping, lads?
Good, Gerard. I think it's actually Wednesday. I know this COVID, we're all losing track of the days, but I'm pretty sure it's Wednesday evening.
What day did I say?
Tuesday, I think. Anyway.
Geez, I'm a day behind. That's a bad sign. How are you, Jack?
I'm very looking forward to the start of the season. You know, as a Cork City fan, the opening stage of the season wasn't great. You know, obviously it was a bit of disappointment, but I think the win against against Finn Harps there, it was the second last game before the shutdown. I think that was definitely a bonus, you know, and it gave us just a bit of encouragement. I know we lost against St. Pat's afterwards, but I think just the resumption of live action and being able to, you know, get to domestic games again is a huge bonus.
Yeah, as far as plenty to look forward to over this weekend. As I mentioned, the Premier Division kind of staggering their games, and I suppose with Champions League knockbacks next weekend, Premier League finished up. La Liga's final day is not till Sunday, so it is a good opportunity for the League of Ireland to kind of really spread its wings this weekend and kind of capture the imagination of the people. I suppose we'll get straight into it, and we'll start with Friday night's games. And the first game that's going to bring it back is the meeting of Derry versus Sligo Rovers, two clubs from the northwest. Still wouldn't maybe quite call it a derby, considering it's a good 2-hour spin from Sligo to Derry. Derry have probably been the busiest team in terms of transfers over this period, particularly over the last week or two. They brought in a couple of players. They brought in Ibrahim Meite from Crawley Town. He's a striker. Jake Dunwoody from Stoke, the midfielder. James Aktunde as well. He came in from non-league side Maidenhead. And then also last week as well, winger Adam Hamill came from Scunthorpe. So they've been pretty busy. In terms of the friendly activity, they lost 1-0 in a game against Bose, but they've made a solid enough start season. 7th with 4 points after 4 games. Sligo, of course, obviously, huge disappointing start, bottom of the table, only team with no points, losing all of their opening 4 games. Obviously bringing in strikers, well, former Derry City player, and from correct in saying top scorer from last year's league, junior Ugadi Usakwe. He came in from the Israel League, so he'll be a good addition to them. And as I mentioned, bottom of the league, but they do have a couple of crucial home games coming up after this, at home to Waterford and Shells, and they're probably 2 games more so than this one that they'll be targeting, Gary.
Yeah, Ger, I actually wouldn't agree. I think Derry have made a terrible start. I think 4 points is a big disappointment for them. They would expect it to be a lot higher. They had a good win over Bose, I'll give you that, but they got a point with the last minute against Finn Harps, and they really would have been expecting to beat Finn Harps at the Brandywell. And I'm actually a bit disappointed. I think Junior is a fantastic signing for Sligo. As you said, leading scorer in the league. I know Derry, I don't really know the players they've bought, but they've certainly been very busy and they seem to be talented players. I'm surprised they didn't get Junior back. But now maybe they think they've upgraded. I don't know. But it's a really important game. I mean, Sligo are pointless. So yeah, they're in. Well, the break will hopefully have done them some good because they were very disappointing before the break. So this is probably a crucial test for both teams. I think Derry will probably see it as a must-win. I think Sligo will be happy with anything just to get on the board. And as you say, these crucial games against Waterford and Shelbourne and the showgrounds coming up. But yeah, so it's a tough one. I would expect Derry to win, but it's going to be tough for them. Sligo, they lost some players during the shutdown, but they've also, I mean, they've done some superb fundraising. I think they've raised over €80,000, and they have a fantastic committee, fantastic fans in the northwest there, and they really get behind their club. But it's going to be a tough season. It's going to be a tough battle for Sligo to stay up. Friday evening, the early game will tell a lot. I suppose, yeah, I would expect Derry to win. But again, it's going to be very hard to see how teams come back after the break, and we'll see what kind of form they come back in.
Jack, we lost you there for a second, but thankfully you're back. There's probably going to be a few internet connections. In fact, Jack is now gone sideways. Oh, he's back there again. We're playing loads of tricks us tonight, Jack. Just on this game yourself, Derry versus Sligo, how do you see it going? Obviously, two teams either side of Cork at the table at the moment. From Sligo point of view, I suppose one of their standout kind of players so far this season has been the 20-year-old Niall Morahan. He's really kind of stepped up. But if a 20-year-old is kind of doing most of your good performance, and you really should be expecting a lot more from the senior players.
Yeah, and just before I start, can you hear me?
We can, yeah. I can anyway, and now he's gone. So until I suppose we get Jack back, Gary, I suppose I can just ask the same question to yourself.
Yeah, I actually saw Niall Morahan with the under-19s. He is a good prospect for hopefully for the national squad as well. But it's asking a lot of somebody to be their star player. But I'll go back to Junior again because I think he's a superb signing, and he scored a lot of goals for Derry when he was there. So I think there is a good chance he will score the goals to keep Sligo up.
Yeah, obviously, as I mentioned, two huge games coming up at home after that against Waterford and Shells. And obviously now with just, I think it's 14 games left this season, so Sligo really have to start hitting the ground running early on. Move on to the game on Friday night, Dundalk versus St. Pat's. That's the game live in RT. And obviously, always a bit of added twist and spice with this game, given the fact that Stephen O'Donnell, the St. Pat's manager, of course, is a legend up in Oriel Park. Now throwing the fact as well that Georgie Kelly has gone to St. Pat's. I think this is a brilliant signing. I think Kelly showed glimpses, even in his time at Dundalk, how prolific he can be. Even in a couple of the friendly matches for Dundalk leading up to the resumption of the league, he was banging in the goals. And that's been the biggest problem for Pats over the last couple of years, pretty much since kind of Christy Fagan has departed.
Yeah, so unfortunately for Pats, he's actually ineligible for Friday night, but he is a great signing. I mean, I think he was getting game time off the bench for Dundalk in the league, as you say. I think, and they're actually, I believe, I don't know if it's confirmed or official, that they're signing David McMillan back. So that's the reason they're letting Georgie Kelly go from a Dundalk perspective, and go on loan, of course. Yes, but that's been Pat's problem, I think, has been scoring goals. So they've got some really lovely players in midfield like Robbie Benson, Chris Forrester, etc. They're creating the chances. They're not really putting in the net. I actually saw them just before lockdown, and Billy King got a great goal. You were with me, Ger, I think, to beat Cork. And but they probably should have scored a couple more that night. So yeah, I think Georgie Kelly, he will obviously play regularly, which is probably what he wants, and it's probably good for Dundalk, that he will play every week for Pats. Probably good for Dundalk that he's not playing in Oriel Park on Friday night as well. Yeah, Stephen O'Donnell is a Dundalk legend, so I don't think there'll be too much needle. I mean, he's certainly well liked and well loved in Oriel Park, but he'll obviously want to prove himself as well. He has made a decent start as Pat's manager, and it will be a tough game for Dundalk on Friday night. I mean, you mentioned the shortened season, so we're down to 18 games, and Dundalk are already 3 points behind Shamrock Rovers because of that defeat in Tala. And I don't believe they can really afford to drop any more points at this stage. So it's a must-win for Dundalk. Now, I would expect them to win at home against St. Pat's, but Pat's are a difficult opponent. It will be very tough, and it wouldn't surprise me if Pat's nicked a point. I don't know what you think of Pat's chances on Friday night.
Yeah, like just before the lockdown, this was obviously meant to be the round of games before that, and I kind of would have felt maybe a little bit confident about Pat's chance going to, because I mentioned they played really well in that Cork game. Kind of typical story of Pat's, like they should have put the game to bed and won by a lot more. I remember Cork missed a great chance at the end to actually equalise that match. Can't remember who it was so long ago.
Yeah, that's right. But no, it would have been a travesty, but you're right. Yeah, but it could have, you know.
like scoring goals has been the big problem. From conceding them hasn't been a main problem. 2 goals only conceded in 4 games, 2 clean sheets is not a bad return. They had the meanest defence in the league before, obviously the breakup. But Dundalk, I think, have conceded no goals at Oriole this season. So if you were to look at that, you'd probably think it was going to be a 0-0. But to be a bit more optimistic now, I would have been confident enough that Pats might have maybe sneaked a point. But it's always going to be a big ask. Like, and as you mentioned, I think for Dundalk now, given the fact that they're 3 points behind Rovers, they've only got one more game against them, albeit that will be at Oriole. They know that, like, especially now the home games, they can't afford to drop points. It's never about maybe only taking a point at, the Dalymount Park or Turner's Cross, everywhere else like that. At home, they've got to go for it. But you probably would be as well. Looking at the friendly form, Dundalk, like, they had some very good victories. They bet Bose comfortably, bet Drogheda, they bet Longford at loan. Pats was a little bit inconsistent. I know that they had a good victories against UCD and Longford. I think they drew with Drogheda as well. So you probably would be inclined just to think that Dundalk would probably pull away with the victory in this one for me. Of course, don't be afraid to also let us know what you think yourselves. Drop in your comments and everything else. We'll obviously try and get through as much as we can over the course of the next half an hour, because we want to get through the first division as well. But we'll move on to Saturday's game. And obviously this is the game that Paul will obviously have most interest in. And of course Gavin as well. We could call the Paul and Gavin derby. Shells versus Waterford, 2 o'clock in Tala. Shelburne, I suppose their main transfer activity over the last couple of months was they brought in Brian McManus from Preston. 18-year-old Alex Seitner, I think that's how he pronounced his name, has moved up from the youth system. Gary Deegan, has probably been their most impressive player so far this season. And it was a decent enough start for them, similar to Pat's. 2 wins from the 4 games, even with 6 points, 5th in the table on goal difference. They'd be happy enough with a couple of their friendly results. They beat Drogheda at loan, UCD and Longford, drew with Bray and lost to Lingfield. From Waterford point of view, obviously, they've obviously dominated a lot of the off the field talk, with Alan Reynolds leaving to take up a position with the Train 1 national side. John Sheridan coming in, he's a couple of experience in from manager from England. And obviously bringing in Darragh Murphy was the big coup as well. They've obviously though lost Kevin O'Connor and Graham Cummins, so that kind of balances itself out a little bit. Their friendly results don't exactly strike with too much confidence. Yes, they bet Shamrock Rovers too, but they lost to Bray, so that was a little bit disappointing. And again, similar enough start for them as well. They're also on 6 points in the first 4 games and just behind Shelburne on goal difference. So probably going by that, you think it'd be a close enough game, but I think Shelburne at home, and also the fact into consideration as well that Waterford, they won't have the luxury of staying overnight before. They will travel up on the bus on Saturday morning. It's a good 2.5, 3 hours from Waterford. You'd have to probably fancy Shelburne at home.
Yeah, I do fancy Shelburne to win it. I wouldn't worry too much about the journey. You've motorway to Waterford now, and it'll be 2 hours comfortable enough to Talca. Waterford also signed Michael O'Connor. That was just announced today. He's leaving Linfield and he's joining Waterford. So I spoke a couple of weeks ago, and I said I was fearful for Waterford, and since then, as you said, they've got John Sheridan in as manager. Daryl Murphy for them is a real coup. I mean, okay, I know he's 37, but he is a good striker. I think he will score goals. And I know a friend of mine who's a Waterford fan was ridiculing me after I said I feared for them for relegation, and he reckons they're going to get into Europe. I wouldn't be so sure of that, but they certainly look a lot stronger now. Yeah, they're both on 6 points. I thought Shelburne had a far better start. They had good win over Pats and a good win down in Cork. They lost at home to Dundalk, but even then it was a cracking game, a great goal from Gary Deegan. They lost in Dalymount against Bose, which was kind of acceptable enough. Okay, they mightn't be happy with it. They didn't really perform. But before lockdown, Shelburne looked really good, and I consider them an outside bet for Europe. Hopefully they can return with the same type of form. Waterford, their 6 points was a great achievement. I think they were a little bit fortunate to beat Pats, if I remember correctly. But 6 points was a decent start. I kind of expected them to be in a relegation battle. Now with Darrell Murphy, Michael O'Connor, John Sheridan and his manager, they probably will be okay. It's an interesting one. Shelbourne it's an interesting week for Shelbourne because they've Waterford at home, then they've Finn Harps and Sligo away. And if they were to get the 7 or 9 points from those 3 games, you really would be talking about them for Europe. If they were to struggle and get 1 or 2 points or no points, then they could end up in the relegation mix. My own belief is Shelbourne will be okay. I do expect them to win on Saturday, with a bit of a caveat because Waterford, they will have a goal threat with Darrell Murphy and Michael O'Connor, and they've Brian Murphy in goal as well. So they'll be okay. They'll be tough to beat, but I fancy Shells to win narrowly.
Yeah, it's always good to tip Shelbourne for a victory. And you know that Paul is listening away in the background, and I hope he's listening with a big smile there, talking them up. And apologies to Gavin if you're listening or if you're watching back to this stuff. We didn't tip Waterford for that game. But yeah, like Brian Murphy, if he performs anywhere like he did on the open night at Richmond Park, they have a chance. And of course, Michael O'Connor, I think that's he's re-signed on because he was there at the start of the season. He particularly played in that game against Pats in the opening night. Move on to the game on Saturday, Dublin again, centre stage. This one, Shamrock Rovers at home against Finn Harps in Tallaght Stadium. They've been the talk of the season before the break. 5 wins from 5 goals coming from plenty of positions. Jack Byrne with 3, Graham Burke with 5. Obviously, a little bit of mixed news on an injury front. Greg Bulger's out for the rest of the season with a serious leg injury, but they can welcome back Sean Kavanagh, who's now recovered from a knee surgery, so that's a massive boost. Finn Harps made a pretty good start to the season, took 4 points from the opening 2 games, but there were signs that maybe that was just starting to wane off in the last few games. They were beaten away by Cork and well beaten at home by Dundalk. They will take confidence in the fact that they've beaten Crusaders and Cliftonville in friendly matches coming into this, but this is going to be a big step up going to Tallaght Stadium.
Yeah, I can't see anything other than a home win in this game. As you said, Rovers they've been fantastic. They've been really impressive, particularly in Tallaght Stadium on the big pitch. And the excellent pitch, excellent surface. It really suits their style of play. Maybe Harps will have half an eye on Tuesday night, an important home game. But yeah, it's Shamrock Rovers, 5 wins out of 5. I think a lot of Rovers fans really feel this is their year to win the title. The shortened season will probably help them. I mean, only playing 18 games. The win over Dundalk feels even more important now than it did at the time, but it felt pretty significant at the time as well. I can't see anything other than, as I said, a home win on Saturday evening. Harps have made a decent start. They'll be very happy with the 4 points. An excellent win over Sligo. But I mean, I think even if you offered Harps the relegation playoff now, they'd bite your hand off for it. It's going to be a long season for them. Every point is going to be important. I don't think Saturday night will have too much of a bearing on whether Harps stay up or not. I suppose I would fear for them if they got a real tonking, but I can't see any other result than the 3 points for Shamrock Rovers on Saturday evening.
Yeah, Finn Harps are well used to that relegation battle and know how somehow one way or another to come out the right side of it. Just of course, if you're tuning in here, it's Gerard Brown and Gary Spain with you. We're live on YouTube as our preview show for this weekend's League of Ireland action, both the Premier Division and First Division. Don't be afraid to get your comments in and ask us anything you want about your respective team as we look ahead to this weekend's games. We're going to move on to the last game of the Premier Division this weekend, and that's on Sunday with Cork City versus Bose. It's obviously disappointing, of course, Jack, who was originally with us but just dropped out due to poor internet connection, to talk about Cork City. I suppose, look, there's a little bit of optimism. Kevin O'Connor is back. Graham Cummins is back. Joseph Awalu and Dishan Darling have extended their loan deals. So that's a little bit optimistic. But the league table isn't optimistic. They've the worst defence in the league. Just 1 win, 4 games, in 9th position. And even looking at their friendly results over the last couple of weeks, Gary, there's nothing really standing out there that were kind of spark you much confidence. They were beaten by First Division sides like Galway and Wexford. The only victory they registered was against Middleton. It doesn't look that awfully optimistic. I suppose the only thing they might point to is the fact they have a good home record against Bohemians.
Yeah, I think even the victory over Middleton in the Munster Cup was a pretty young team. I think they fielded a lot of their under-19s or whatever in that game. Yeah, I mean it's a long season. It's amazing to see Cork down near the bottom of the league, and make no mistake about it, they are in a relegation battle. And unlike the likes of Finn Harps, as you mentioned, Cork are not used to this. I mean, Ollie Horgan, Harps, it's old hat for them. They're well able to battle. They'll battle and graft for every point. But yeah, they have made some good signs. You said Graham Cummins, I believe, is coming back to play centre half. That would be interesting to see how
That's
that
very
works
interesting.
out. But
Yeah,
that's what I read anyway. I don't know whether that's gonna pan out like that.
solved
That'll
their
be
defensive
interesting.
issues.
Could be wrong on that, but that's what I read. Deshaun Darling is a good. It's good to extend his loan. I thought he had some nice touches about him. Um, and Bose haven't been that impressive in pre-season either. They took quite a tonking up at Windsor Park against Linfield. So it'll be an interesting one. Bose had started very well. I mean, I think 9 points was a decent return. They're clear in third place at the moment, and I think that's their aim. I think third or fourth is their target. I don't think anyone's going to challenge Dundalk and Rovers for the top 2 spots. At Bose, they don't have a great record in Turner's Cross, but if they are going to challenge for Europe again and to get back into Europe, I know they haven't even played in Europe, but to get back into Europe for next season, I think this is one of the games they're going to have to go down and win in Turner's Cross. I think they're well capable of it, but it's going to be a tough one. Cork, they're never easy to beat in Turner's Cross, despite the fact they won't have their great home support. Despite their bad season, they've record sales. They have the best sales for streaming of all the clubs, ahead of Shamrock Rovers, ahead of Dundalk. It just shows the passion there is for football on Leeside, how well supported that club is. But it's going to be a long season for them, and I fear for them for one extent that they're not used to being in a relegation battle. Sunday will be interesting. It's a tough enough one to call. I edging slightly towards an away win, but not with a lot of confidence. And I don't know. What do you think, Gerard? Who do you think? Who do you fancy?
It's tough. And you mentioned, yeah, Bowls probably haven't been the most impressive in pre-season either, but I suppose they got a good victory, or mid-season, whatever you want to call it. They got a good victory against Longford there last week, so that'll probably help a small little bit. The record in Turner's Cross isn't great. 2017 was their last victory, so that's 4 games now without a visit. They've taken a couple of bad beatings in that time as well over the last couple of years. Going down there, you get the feeling very much with Cork and with Neil Finn, it's a project. It's going to take a while. It's probably going to take maybe 2 or 3 seasons if they're willing to be patient enough and stick at them to get them kind of back where they were, and if they could somehow sneak a Europa League place and just even get back into European football, or do well in the cup competition, it would help. Bowls are one of them kind of sides I would have feared for the start of the season. I just kind of felt maybe they slightly overachieved last season. I felt some of the clubs in and around them, particularly like my own club, St. Pat's, I felt maybe underachieved. But no, they've carried on. They've kicked on that momentum from last season. Had a pretty good start. Very good at daily amount. Obviously beating Shells just there as well, the last game before the break. This, yeah, is a tricky enough one. Like Cork, really, I know it's only the 5th game of the season or 6th game of the season, but they really have to start getting hit the ground running. They won't want to be in a relegation playoff. You mentioned that'll do for Finn Harps if you'd offer them 9th. For Cork, no. Like 8th is definitely the minimum of their requirements this season, so they kind of have to start get going. But just purely based on from any little bit of form that you can take from them friendlies, I probably would also agree with you. I think Bohemians could sneak a little victory. And also just a good little note as well, over them, of course, that matches. I think it was a Linkfield match. Danny Corcoran made his return after about 14 months out injury with a serious leg injury. So it's great to see him back, and hopefully he can ease himself back into the team over the course of the next couple of weeks. We'll move on now to the first, I was just looking at a couple of comments coming in here as well. Barry Scott, just on about, of course, the interest with Danny Mandrew, a couple of Dutch clubs in particular, and FC20 looking for him. What do you actually make of that yourself, Gary?
Yeah, it's he'd be a massive loss for Bose. He is a brilliant player. He's their talisman going forward. He's a real threat. So I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm actually not surprised more of our players don't end up on the continent rather than always looking across the water for going to say, let's say, bigger clubs or whatever. So yeah, I think Danny Mandrew will be well able to cope in the Dutch league. 20, if I struggling a little bit off the top of my head, but I believe they've actually struggled in the last couple of years. They were a club you would have seen a lot in Europe. I'm actually struggling to think. I think
They're
were
in the
they
first division.
relegated to the second tier? Sorry?
They got relegated in
Yeah.
2017-2018 season. Yes, they've fallen a long way because it's not that long
Okay.
ago. They won the league under Steve McLaren. Just as well, just before we wrap that up and move on to the first division as well, just one of the comments coming in there as well from R_Laddie. He's a Cork City fan, and even he's not that optimistic. He's predicting an easy victory for Bose. So worrying signs if Cork City fans are going to if they're already giving up a little bit of hope and haven't even kicked the ball on the restart. We'll move on to the first division, Gary. 4 of these games taking place on Friday. One of the more interesting ones is the meeting of UCD. First is Longford. It's 4th versus 2nd. UCD, not much has really changed there. No players have come in or out to report. They've had a couple of the Premier Division teams in friendlies. They played Rovers, Pats, and Shells. They didn't win any of them, but obviously they would have gained a lot of experience from that. A mixed bag, 1 win, 1 draw, 1 defeat from their first 3 games. Probably most worrying was the fact that defeat was a 5-1 defeat away to Drogheda. Longford, interesting position. They're 3rd, but they've only played 2 games. They won both then games. They haven't conceded a goal yet this season. They've got that game in hand coming up against Bray now as well on Monday, so they had the chance to potentially draw level or leapfrog Cavan to the top of the table if results go the way. And at least they said they've probably got arguably the best goalkeeper in the division.
Yeah, I think Longford are one of the strongest teams in the division, if not the strongest. So they have 100% start. I mean, just because one of their games is called off is probably the reason they're not. Well, Bray might object to that, but they would probably be up joint top with Cavan. UCD, my understanding is they're in a bit of a rebuilding phase. They had lost a lot of players. I think this was seen as a season where they'll be rebuilding. They might sneak into the playoffs in kind of 4th or 5th. Maybe not. They always do seem to go away and maybe for a season or 2 regenerate in the first division. They always discover players. They get some good guys in scholarships. So I think Longford will probably win this. I think 4th is probably the height of UCD's ambition. And I think Longford will either win the division or certainly be very, very close to it. So I would expect Longford to win at Belfield on Friday night. Lee Stacey's an excellent keeper, as you say, and they've built a decent squad there, and they'll be tough to beat, and they will be there or thereabouts at the finish. If not, in a champions is automatic, they'll be definitely in the playoffs and very close to probably to win the playoff if they're not in the play if they're not champions.
Yeah, I think Dara Doyle will be hoping to build on the good work that Neil Finn has done over there the last couple of years to build Longford back up to being serious first division contenders. I should also note as well that they have brought in Lido Lotefea from Dundalk as well. So obviously bringing the player from the Premier Division is obviously always going to strengthen their cause and case as well. Move on then a little bit further down south from Donnybrook and UCD to Bray, and they're at home to Cove on Friday night. Same time kickoff as well, 7:45. Bray have been busy enough as well. Callum Thompson and Sean McAvoy have come in. Dara Gibson, Ben McCann, Andrew Morgan, and Lee Kavanagh have left though during the break. They'll take plenty of confidence as well from the fact they bet Waterford 1-0 in a recent friendly. Bit of a disappointing start to the season. They're 5th with just 3 points from their 2 games. As I mentioned, they play Longford in a rearranged game on Monday. One of that game that they did lose, they were well beaten away to Cavan because they all 4 goals in the first half. As for Cove, they're 6th with 3 points from their opening 3 games. Their sole victory coming against Athlone in their last outing. They picked Cork as well in a friendly. They drew that 1-1. They played Avondale. They bet them 2-0. And they've also managed to bring in a player from Avondale, their goalkeeper, Shane Barron, as well. Tricky one to kind of call here, even looking at table and form as well. You would be kind of nearly inclined to think that this one could end up with a draw, Gary.
Yeah, possibly, Ger, or maybe I make Bray slight favourites to edge it. Cove did really well last season, but they lost a couple of key players to Shelbourne, I think, Fernandez and Kabaya. And they lost Stephen Henderson as well, who's gone up there as part of the coaching staff. They're probably in a rebuilding phase. Again, Cove are probably a team. They're better than the teams at the bottom, the likes of Athlone, Wexford, etc. You probably expect to end up possibly Shamrock Rovers 2 as well down there. I think Cove will probably be ahead of them. An outside chance of pushing for the playoffs. But Bray, it's been a disappointment. I was actually shocked that Cabinteely effectively hammered them and the game was over at half time, as you said. They're probably still a bit off challenging for promotion, but could be certainly challenging for the playoffs. The playoffs are interesting in this first division. There's going to be, I think every game is going to become important because 4 teams, you have the champions get promotion and then 2nd to 5th all end up in the playoffs. And Shamrock Rovers 2 aren't eligible. So nearly every team, possibly with the exception of Wexford and Athlone, forgive me those fans, but I don't think either of them are going to be contenders. Apart from those 2, I would imagine that every team will have designs on at least making the playoffs. And then you never know. It's one match, 90 minutes, semi-final. Okay, you got a final, and then you got to play the Premier Division team. So it's a bit of a long road. But if you make the playoffs, get a bit of form. Bray, I suspect, I think they might just edge it at home to Cove, but I'm not saying that with a lot of conviction. I haven't actually seen any first division matches even before lockdown, so I would like to get out and see a couple of them. But yeah, I think Bray probably just might have a bit more about them to edge that one.
Yeah, I suppose we'll know more come 9:35 or 9:40 on Friday evening. Move then over to the west, a bit closer home to myself. Galway United home against Cabinteely. Galway probably, for all the team, that would have been the biggest hype about the first division. A lot of you thought they were going to be serious contender for promotion this season. They've probably been the biggest disappointment with 2 draws and opening 2 games. And when you consider they were away to Shamrock Rovers 2 and home against Wexford, their 2 games they would have severely targeted. Shane Doherty is resigned from the club, the American player, so that's a little bit of a boost. Dean O'Halloran and Canadian winger Dylan Scaramento have left during the break. Bit of a mixed bag in some of their games. They bet Cork 2-1, so that was a good kind of sign of things to come. But lost 2-0 to Sligo Rovers. Cabinteely have been, just like last season, the talk of the first division. They're top of the table, 100% record, 3 wins from 3. And probably the thing that's most impressed me about Cabinteely was a lot of their goals last season, and the feeling was they were very dependent on Rob Manley. They've had 4 different scorers in the first 3 games this season, with Shane Barnes leading the way with 3 of them.
Yeah, so Rob Manley was the key player for them last season, as you say, with all the goals. They've had a superb start, and the break has come as the worst time possible for Cabo. They had looked really good. Galway, as you say, were a huge disappointment. I was one of the people that really fancied them. I thought they'd have a real go at this division. 2 very disappointing results. Let's not say anything about it. They would have expected to go to Tala and beat Shamrock Rovers 2. They would certainly have expected to beat Wexford as well. In fact, the game against Athlone, I think, that was called off, they potentially would have hoped to be on 9 points at this stage. So the break has probably come at a good time for Galway. It's a good game for Galway to have. I mean, Cabinteely, the league leaders, they could really lay down a marker if they can beat them at Eamon DC Park. Am I going to double down? I think I was expecting Galway to make a real run at this. I think maybe sitting the fence a little bit and maybe predict a draw for this one. But it's probably a tough one to call. If you go on form before lockdown, you'd have to say a Cabo win. But if you're looking at the start of the season, you would have fancied Galway for this one.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it plays. I kind of would agree with you. I think if you were to look at on paper, you might have even said Galway would have fancied this one with the way the fixtures fell to make it 4 wins from 4. But Cabinteely showed that they weren't a one-trick pony last season, that they weren't a flash in the pan, that they mean business and they have serious aspirations of being in the Premier Division. I was at their opening game against Bray. I probably would have fancied Bray to start for the victory in Stradbrook, but like I said, they blew them away. Now, the elements were very tricky that night, but they blew them away in the opening 45 minutes and had the game wrapped up, and they've kicked on. I've actually seen them as well against Athlone, and that was a game that was there for the taking for either team with about 20 minutes, half an hour to go, and they just kicked on, they just powered on, had too much, and ended up winning the game comfortably 3-1. So if they can kind of rediscover that, I know it's hard after 4 or 5 month break. If they can rediscover that, I think they're capable of taking another big result on Friday night. We move on to the other game on Friday night, and that's Athlone versus Wexford. And if we were to believe yourself, Gary, you think this is just going to be a battle for 9th versus 10th. But Wexford have shown some sort of glimpses. That draw away against Galway would be seen as a big result for them. They bet Cork as well in a recent friendly match, so they'll take encouragement from that. From that lone point of view, they bet Sligo, so they also feel that that's a good sign, and they can kind of kick on from that. They have a pretty young team this season, so I suppose the fact that one of their older players and more experienced players from the last couple of years, Kieran Grogan, has rejoined from Cavan Tivoli would be a boost.
Yeah, so as I said, I do expect this to be a bit of a basement battle. Wexford have had a couple of good results. I think they drew with UCD before the lockdown as well, which was a little bit of a surprise. So they have started well. I mean, so maybe I'm being a bit too hard on them, being a bit too down on them. But yeah, I would expect, having said all that, I would have expect at the end of the season, you're probably looking at these couple of teams being 8th, 9th or 10th. I go for a Wexford win here on the basis that they have made the better start. They have looked slightly better in the friendlies, and I appreciate that Lone did beat Sligo. But so I think Wexford to edge it without a lot of conviction. But I think both clubs are probably at a stage where they're still rebuilding and looking towards the future. And I can't really see either side making any sort of a run at the playoffs this season. But hey, let me know in the comments. Do you think people in Wexford or Athlone, you know your clubs far better than me? Do you think something's happening? Do you think there's a chance for one of them to make a run for the playoffs, or what do you think? I don't know.
Well, if Wexford win this game and results go their way, they could actually find themselves in the playoff places come Friday night and around it. So they'll start to think maybe they're gathering a little bit of momentum. And it could be just one of them seasons because it's shorter. Like I said, if you can gather momentum, it'll carry you a long way this season, and a good run of 4 or 5 victories can have you right up there, and you can just manage to see it out. We'll wrap up our preview with Sunday's game, Shamrock Rovers 2 versus Drogheda. Drogheda are a team as well, I think a bit like Longford. They've been knocking on the door now for the last couple of years. Missed out on the playoffs for the last couple of years, I think, to Finn Harps. They're a team that really kind of captures my eye because they've so much firepower up front. They're always up there for one of the top scorers in the division. But clearly, obviously, they must be quite leaky at the back that they managed to let in a couple of goals. I think Kieran McIver would be the best man to talk about this because he obviously sees them week in, week out. But this is definitely a game they're going to be targeting against the Shamrock Rovers 2 side. They've just 1 point from their opening 3 games.
Yeah, so I believe Shamrock Rovers 2 were a little bit unfortunate not to have a couple more points, but still, you would fancy Drogheda for this. They are, if anyone is going to challenge Longford and Cavan Tivoli at the top, I think it's Drogheda, and they really have to go to Tala on Sunday and get the 3 points if they are going to challenge for the possibly still win the league. They still have a good chance. They, as you said, they came so close last season in the playoff against Finn Harps. I think they won the first leg. I was actually at the first leg. I'm pretty sure in United Park. Pretty sure they won that, but lost out eventually. They certainly did. They did very well. Perhaps a little fortunate to beat Cabo actually, but they did come so close to getting to the Premier Division. They won't be far away again this season, but they will have to win and string together a run of wins because Longford and Cabo and possibly Galway coming back into it will be tough opponents.
Yeah, I think like games like this against like the Wexford, Athlone, Shamrock Rovers 2, with no respect to them, if you're going to be challenging for promotion, expecting to be up there come the business season, these are games you've got to win, and especially now the fact as well that they've lost around the games in the first division, so there is really no room for error really in this league. I suppose that's pretty much where we have covered, Gary. We've got all 10 games that are covered. There are a couple of games then on Monday and Tuesday, rearrange games in both divisions, but I suppose pretty hard to kind of predict them things when you don't really know how the games this weekend will go. They obviously have huge significant impact on that. But thanks very much for joining me, Gary. It'll be interesting to see will many people take aboard your predictions, doing a accumulator off that, and you might make a couple of people very happy with a lot of money. Cheers, Gary.
Cheers.
Thanks very much. Keep tuned, of course, here on Irish Football Fan TV. Follow us on Twitter at Irish Fan TV. You'll find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching Irish Football Fan TV. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channels. Our YouTube channel, we don't have 2 channels, where you'll see more great videos, of course, over the course of the next couple of days. And hopefully we'll have plenty of match reaction to the games coming up over the course of the weekend. But until then, keep safe, everyone out there.